My name is Adam, and this is the story of how my own brother stole everything from me, my home, my inheritance, my future, and how life eventually made him regret it more deeply than I ever imagined. People say betrayal comes from strangers. But the truth is, the sharpest knife always comes from someone who knows exactly where your heart is. If you're watching this, let this story be a reminder. Family can lift you up. But sometimes, family can be the reason you fall. And sometimes, that fall is exactly what leads you to the place you were meant to be all along. Before I begin, leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It's always humbling to see how far these stories travel. And don't forget to subscribe my channel. And if you've ever been betrayed by someone close, a sibling, a parent, a friend, I hope my story gives you some comfort tonight. Because I learned something powerful the hard way. People can steal your money, but they can't steal your purpose. This is my story. I grew up believing my brother, Ethan, would always be my protector. We were only 2 years apart. We shared a bedroom, shared chores, shared secrets we swore we'd take to the grave. He was the loud one, charismatic, confident, the one everyone gravitated toward. I was quieter. More careful. More trusting, painfully trusting, as I'd learn later. Our parents raised us in a small town outside Nashville. We didn't have much, but what we lacked financially, we made up for with closeness. Family dinners every night. Movie nights on Fridays. Football in the backyard on Sundays. And Dad. Dad always said the same thing. Family is all you have in the end, boys. Stick together. I believed him. Ethan pretended to. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Maybe it was high school, when Ethan realized he could charm his way through anything, teachers, friends, even consequences. Maybe it was when he learned that Mom and Dad would give him second, third, fourth chances. Maybe it was when trouble started coming easier to him than honesty. But by the time we were adults, the divide was obvious. I worked. Ethan schemed. I saved. Ethan spent. I followed rules. Ethan bent every single one. Still, he was my brother. And family loyalty ran deeper in me than self-protection. When our parents began getting older, I took on more responsibility, doctor's appointments, bills, home repairs, everything they needed. Ethan visited when he wanted money. He'd show up with flowers, big smiles, and empty pockets. Mom never saw through it. Dad tried to, but by then he was too tired to fight. But the moment everything truly changed was the day my father died. He passed in the early morning, in the quiet of his favorite armchair. No pain. No struggle. Just, gone. I was the one who found him. Ethan showed up an hour later, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "We'll get through this together, okay?" I believed him. Because grief makes fools of us all. Mom broke down in ways I didn't know a human heart could break. And through all her mourning, Ethan stayed close, closer than usual. Almost too close. He kept asking questions. What did Dad leave behind? Any savings left? Did he ever finish the paperwork on the house? Did you find any documents in his desk? At the time, I assumed it was curiosity. I assumed everyone processed grief differently. I didn't realize Ethan was planting seeds. Tiny, invisible roots of a plan he'd been crafting for years. But Mom wasn't naive. One night, weeks after the funeral, she pulled me aside and said something that still echoes in my mind. "Adam, watch your brother. I love him. But that boy is hungry for things he didn't earn." I promised her I would. I didn't. Not soon enough. Because grief makes you blind. And love, especially love for family, can make you ignore the warning signs even when they're right in front of you. And Ethan. Ethan was just getting started. 3 months after Dad's passing, Mom called us both into the living room. Her hands trembled as she held a thin folder, old, worn, and tied with a faded green ribbon. "Your father updated this the year before he died," she said softly. "He didn't want anyone arguing after he was gone." I remember sitting beside her, feeling a strange mix of dread and gratitude. Ethan's eyes were different. He leaned forward, tapping his foot, restless, almost eager. Mom opened the folder. Inside was Dad's last will and testament. "Not notarized," she explained. "Dad trusted us. He said paperwork didn't matter when hearts were good. If only he knew." She read it aloud, voice steady despite her grief. It was simple. Dad wanted the house split between us, equal share. His savings, modest but meaningful, to be shared as well. His truck to Ethan, because it was something they always bonded over. His workshop tools to me, because I was the only one who used them. Everything else, divide fairly. Equal. Honest. Exactly as Dad was in life. But Ethan. Ethan didn't smile. He didn't say thank you. He didn't even nod. He just stared at the paper as though something wasn't right. "How old is this?" he finally asked. Mom blinked. "Your father updated it last year. No lawyers. No signatures. No witnesses." Mom frowned. "He trusted you boys. He always did." Ethan leaned back, arms crossed, thinking, calculating. Something cold spread through my stomach. For the next few weeks, things were tense. Ethan became distant, spending more time with new friends, people none of us recognized. He made phone calls behind closed doors. He visited Mom less and less. Until one afternoon, when everything snapped. I was fixing a loose cabinet door in Mom's kitchen when a loud knock echoed through the house. 2 sheriff's deputies stood on the porch. "Are you Adam Carter?" one asked. "Yes," I replied, confused. "We need to talk to you and your brother." Ethan appeared behind them, hands in his pockets, pretending to be surprised. My mother asked what was going on. The deputy answered. "We received a report of forgery regarding Mr. Carter's will." My heart stopped. Ethan's eyes flicked toward me. "What?" "That's ridiculous," I said. "It was Dad's handwriting, his signature, everything." "That's the problem," the deputy said. "Your brother claims you forged it." The world spun. "What?" Mom gasped. "Ethan, tell me you didn't say that." Ethan looked her straight in the eyes. "I'm sorry, Mom, but the will wasn't official. Dad told me before he died he wanted me to handle things. He wouldn't have written all that down without witnesses. It doesn't make sense." "You liar," I whispered. It was all I could manage. Ethan stepped back, wounded expression plastered across his face. "Look, I just want what's fair." Fair. The word tasted like poison. The deputies apologized, saying they were only doing their job. Because it was a family matter and not proven criminally, they couldn't arrest anyone, but they had to file a report. Ethan had already filed his. He'd prepared everything. Mom broke down after they left, sobbing in my arms. "I should have listened," she cried. "I should have seen what he was capable of." I held her tightly, but my own chest felt hollow. That night, Ethan didn't come back. He didn't answer calls. Didn't respond to texts. 3 days later, a lawyer's envelope arrived in the mailbox. Ethan was officially challenging the will, claiming Dad had verbally promised him the house, and that he believed I had manipulated Mom into reading a forged document. I sat on the couch staring at the papers for the longest time. Mom wept again. Not because of the house. Not because of the money. But because Ethan was tearing our family apart over something Dad wanted to keep simple. And in that moment, something inside me broke too. Not anger. Not hatred. Just heartbreak. Heartbreak that the boy I once shared a bedroom with, the boy I once believed would protect me, had become someone capable of destroying everything our parents built. And I had no idea that this was only the beginning. Ethan didn't speak to me or Mom for nearly 2 months. Not a phone call. Not a message. Not a visit. But his shadow hovered over us every single day. Letters from lawyers. Requests for documents. Threats of escalation. He wanted the house. All of it. Not half. Not shared ownership. Everything. I kept thinking he would stop. That guilt would pull him back. That the brother I knew, or thought I knew, would return. But instead, he doubled down. My mother hated lawyers, courts, anything remotely legal. She believed that family matters should be handled with hearts, not paperwork. But Ethan, he'd chosen paperwork as his weapon. And so, reluctantly, painfully, we hired a lawyer, a quiet, tired-looking man named Hutchinson who had seen 1,000 broken families walk into his office. He read the case, shook his head, and said, "This is ugly. Your brother is banking on one thing, that your mom won't fight back." He was right. Ethan thought Mom was too fragile. He thought I was too soft. He thought greed would win. We spent weeks gathering old documents, tax forms, receipts, Dad's handwriting samples, old photo albums. Anything to prove the will was authentic. Hutchinson warned us. An unwitnessed will is legal, but vulnerable. The judge will rely on your father's history, behavior, handwriting, and logic. Your brother's claims complicate things. Complicate was an understatement. The first hearing was small, just us, Ethan, and our lawyers. When I walked into the courtroom, I barely recognized him. He wore a crisp suit. New haircut. New watch. He looked polished. Not like the brother who used to borrow money from me. Not like the guy who once slept on my couch for 3 months after losing a job. He looked like someone who wanted the world to believe he was the responsible son. He didn't look at me. Didn't look at Mom. He only looked at the judge. Our lawyer presented the will. Explained the context. Explained Dad's habits, that he trusted his sons, that he wrote things down himself, that he hated paperwork. Then Ethan's lawyer stood up and claimed, "The will lacks proper witnessing. There is reason to believe the document may have been altered after Mr. Carter's passing. My client remembers his father verbally promising him full responsibility over the house." Responsibility. A fancy word for possession. Mom squeezed my hand so tightly I felt my fingers go numb. When the judge asked Ethan directly, "Did your father ever tell your brother, Adam, that he would receive the house?" Ethan paused, just long enough to make the lie believable. Then he said, "No. Dad told me he wanted me to take care of it. Adam, he wasn't really involved." My jaw clenched. Mom gasped softly. The judge noticed. But Ethan continued with a rehearsed speech about how he was closer to Dad, how he visited more often, how he was more responsible. All lies. But lies told confidently can look like truth. When we left the courtroom, Ethan brushed past us without a word. Mom called out, "Ethan, please, talk to me. I'm still your mother." He stopped, turned slowly, and said something I will never forget. "I'm doing what Dad wanted. You two just can't accept it." Then he walked away. Mom crumbled into me, sobbing into my shoulder right there in the courthouse hallway. Our lawyer approached quietly and said, "This isn't about the house anymore. He's fighting for something else, pride, ego, maybe resentment." I nodded, but I knew the truth. Ethan wasn't fighting for the house. He was fighting to win. To control. To take. And deep down, he was fighting to erase me. The court battle dragged on for more than a year. A year of tension. A year of lawyers. A year of sleepless nights for Mom. A year of pretending everything was okay while neighbors whispered. A year of Ethan growing colder, angrier, and more distant. Mom aged a decade in those 12 months. Her hair grayed faster. Her hands shook more. Her breathing became shallow and uneven when she talked about Ethan. "Why, Adam?" she would ask me at least once a week. "Why is he doing this to us?" I never had an answer. One evening, after a long day discussing financial evaluations with our lawyer, I found Mom sitting on the porch swing, staring at the sunset with tears streaming down her face. "Come sit," she whispered. I sat beside her. For a long time, she said nothing. Just breathed in that slow, painful way people breathe when they're trying not to fall apart. Then she said, "I failed you boys." Her voice cracked. I shook my head. "Mom, no, you didn't." "Listen to me," she said firmly, placing her hand on mine. "All these years, I thought love alone would guide you both. I thought if I loved you enough, you'd love each other enough. But maybe I should have taught Ethan what consequences look like." I stayed quiet. She wasn't wrong. She wiped her cheek and continued. "Your father knew Ethan was impulsive. But he always believed he'd grow out of it. That losing a job or two would humble him. But instead, we kept rescuing him." Her eyes dropped to the floor. "And now he's hurting us in ways we never imagined." I pulled her into a hug. She cried and cried, long, painful sobs that shook her entire body. At some point, she whispered, "I feel like I'm losing both my sons." I didn't realize how badly that line would stick in my chest. The next morning, I found her collapsed in the kitchen. The coffee pot shattered on the floor. Her breathing wet and ragged. Her face pale and drained. I called 911, hands trembling, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the dispatcher. The EMTs arrived quickly. They tried to stabilize her. Tried to reassure me. But the moment they lifted her onto the stretcher, she grabbed my hand and croaked. "Don't let him take everything, Adam, don't let him take what your father built." Her hand slipped away. They carried her out. At the hospital, doctors told me she'd had a stress-induced heart episode. Her body, already fragile from age and grief, had been pushed too hard. "She needs rest," the doctor said. "She needs peace." Peace. Something we hadn't had since the moment Ethan filed his claim. I called Ethan. Straight to voicemail. I called again. And again. Finally, hours later, he answered. "What?" he said, annoyed. "Mom's in the hospital," I said, voice shaking. "She collapsed. You need to come." Silence. A long silence. Then he said, "I'm busy right now." Busy. Ethan, she could have died. He exhaled sharply. "Look, I'll try to stop by tomorrow. Or this weekend. I've got things going on." Things. I wanted to scream. I wanted to yell at him until the world cracked open and swallowed us both. But instead, I said, "She asked for you." Another silence. Colder this time. "I'll see what I can do," he replied. He never came. Not that day. Not that week. Not for the next month, as Mom slowly recovered, sitting in a quiet hospital room staring at the door each day, hoping he would walk through it. He didn't even send flowers. And something in her changed because of it. Not anger. Not hate. Something sadder. A gentle, quiet realization that sometimes love isn't enough to change the people we wish it could. One afternoon, as I helped her sit up in bed, she said, "Adam, I don't want the house anymore." I froze. "What do you mean?" "I want to sell it," she whispered. "Before Ethan takes it. Before he destroys the last piece of your father." I shook my head. "No, Mom. This house means everything to us." She placed her frail hand on mine. "It means everything to me too, sweetheart. But it's breaking us apart. And your father, he would never want that." I wanted to argue. To fight. To insist we keep it. But looking at her, small, fragile, tired, I realized she wasn't giving up. She was letting go. And sometimes, letting go is the strongest thing a person can do. Mom's condition stabilized eventually, but she was never the same. Her smile grew rarer. Her steps slower. Her voice softer. Ethan's betrayal wasn't just costing us a house. It was costing us her heart. And I knew. The worst was yet to come. I will never forget the day the letter came. A thin white envelope in the mailbox, stamped with the county court seal. The kind of envelope that always holds bad news. The kind of envelope that makes your stomach drop before you even open it. But I opened it. Hands shaking. Heart pounding. Mom sitting beside me, holding her breath. The letter was simple. Cold. Clinical. The judge had ruled in Ethan's favor. Just like that. Dad's unwitnessed will was deemed insufficiently supported. Our testimony was considered emotionally biased. The handwriting analysis was inconclusive. And Ethan's claim, the one about Dad privately expressing his wishes, was plausible enough to justify awarding him full control of the property. Full control. Not shared. Not partial. Everything. The house. The land. Dad's belongings. The savings Dad left behind. All of it. Mom covered her mouth, shoulders shaking with shock. I felt the room spinning, my vision blurring, my heart hollowing out. Ethan had won. He had taken everything. The next day, he arrived at the house accompanied by two men in suits. Mom was still too fragile to get out of bed, so I met them at the door. Ethan stepped forward with a smirk so faint only someone who had known him his whole life would recognize it. "Adam," he said, pretending to sigh, "let's not make this harder than it needs to be." "Harder?" I whispered. "You stole our home, Ethan." He rolled his eyes. "I didn't steal anything. I protected what Dad wanted." And the court agreed. One of the men behind him spoke. "We're here to do an inventory. The property legally belongs to Mr. Ethan Carter as of this morning." My heartbeat thundered in my ears. "You're evicting your own mother?" I asked. Ethan shrugged. "She doesn't have to go far. She can stay with you, right?" "She lives here," I snapped. "We grew up here. Dad built this house for us. And now it's mine," he replied calmly. No guilt. No remorse. Not even a flicker of hesitation. I wanted to punch him. I wanted to scream. But Mom's voice echoed in my memory. "Don't let him take everything your father built. Fighting physically would only give him more power." So I stepped aside. The men walked through the house with clipboards, tagging furniture, appliances, even Dad's tools. Tools he'd taught me to use. Tools we'd repaired together in that dusty old workshop. Tools that smelled like sawdust and memory. I followed them silently, each tag like a dagger twisting deeper in my chest. In Dad's workshop, one of the men paused by his toolbox. "These go to auction," he said. "Wait," I choked out. "Dad left those to me." "Not legally," Ethan said behind me. Everything goes through me. Everything. The word echoed like a curse. When they finished tagging the house, Ethan walked through the living room, hands in his pockets, surveying it like a man inspecting a property he just purchased. He stopped by a framed photo on the wall, a picture of the two of us as kids, covered in mud, grinning from ear to ear. For a moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Regret? Nostalgia? Humanity? But then he said, "You'll need to be out in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? I repeated. Mom just got out of the hospital. That's not my problem, he said. You're unbelievable, I whispered. He smiled faintly. I'm practical. No, I said, stepping closer, voice trembling. You're heartless. You're selfish. You're not the brother Dad raised. At that, something flickered in his expression, anger, maybe. Or guilt he didn't want to show. He leaned in. You always thought you were better than me, he whispered. You always thought you deserved more. No, I said softly. I just wanted us to be brothers. He scoffed. Well, that ship sailed a long time ago. He left without another word, the men following. The house felt empty after they were gone. Like the spirit of our family had been ripped out of its walls. I heard a soft sob from the hallway. Mom stood there, clutching the doorframe, tears streaming down her cheeks. I never thought, she whispered. My own son. I held her as she cried. As she trembled. As she realized she no longer had a home. I wanted to tell her it would be okay. That we would rebuild. That everything would somehow work out. But I didn't have the strength to lie. Not yet. The next 2 weeks were some of the hardest days of my life. We packed quietly, slowly, painfully. Every item we touched felt like a memory being boxed up and shelved away. Mom cried over old photo albums. Over Dad's coat. Over the worn-out recliner he used to watch football in. I found myself crying too, privately, late at night, when Mom was asleep. I kept telling myself it was just a house. Just wood and nails and drywall. But it wasn't just that. It was childhood. It was safety. It was the last physical piece of Dad we had left. And Ethan had taken it without blinking. On the last day, as we finished packing the final boxes into my truck, Mom asked to walk through the house one last time. She moved slowly, touching the walls, the door frames, the counters, each place holding a memory. This kitchen, she whispered, your father cooked Sunday breakfast here every week. She stepped into the living room. This couch, you boys used to fall asleep watching movies together. She stepped into the hallway. These walls held so much laughter. Then she reached the doorway of Dad's workshop and stopped. This room, she said softly, was where your father went to think. To fix. To build. A long silence passed. Then she looked at me with a trembling smile. He would be proud of you, Adam. The words broke something inside me, but in a healing way, like a bone resetting after being fractured. We walked out of the house together. And that's when we saw Ethan's car pull into the driveway. He stepped out, sunglasses on, wearing a fitted jacket and looking as if nothing unusual was happening. What are you doing here? I asked, exhausted. Checking on my property, he said. Making sure everything is ready for the cleaners. Mom winced as though he'd struck her. Ethan, she said weakly, please don't talk about it like that. He looked at her, cool and detached. Mom, I'm not trying to hurt you. But the house is mine now. I just need to move on. Move on? Mom whispered. You're evicting your own family, and you talk about moving on? Ethan shrugged. You had options. You could have settled this when I first said something. But you made it a fight. That was it. That was the final straw. Mom collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing into her hands. Years of pain spilling out all at once. The sight shook me to my core. And Ethan. Ethan just watched. No remorse. No guilt. Something inside me snapped. I stepped right up to him, inches from his face. "You want to know the truth?" I said, voice shaking with rage. "You didn't win. You lost everything. You lost your brother. You lost your mother. You lost the only people who ever loved you." Ethan clenched his jaw. "I don't need you," he said. "I don't need anyone." I nodded slowly. "You say that now. But one day you'll realize what you threw away. And on that day, you'll regret every single thing you've done." His expression faltered for the first time. A crack in the armor. But he turned away. Mom tried to stand, so I helped her into the truck. She was trembling so badly I had to hold her hand the entire ride. As we pulled out of the driveway, she whispered, "I don't recognize my own son anymore. We left the house behind. We left our memories behind. We left Ethan behind." And as we drove away, I realized something. He hadn't just taken our home. He had taken the last thread holding our family together. But what I didn't know then was that life had a way of returning everything that was stolen. And exposing the ones who took it. Ethan hadn't reached the end of his story. Not even close. And his regret. That was coming. Moving into my small apartment felt like stepping into someone else's life. No creaking floors that held stories. No smell of Dad's wood workshop drifting down the hall. No sunlight pouring through the kitchen window the same way it had every morning of my childhood. It felt hollow. Mom tried to be brave. She unpacked quietly, folding towels with shaking hands, placing picture frames on shelves where they didn't seem to belong. But I could see the pain in her eyes, a deep, persistent grief. The grief of losing a home is different than the grief of losing a person. It's like losing the container that held every memory. Every tradition. Every piece of who you once were. I tried everything to lift her spirits. I cooked her favorite meals. We watched old movies. We took walks in the park. But she was fading. Not physically, emotionally. One night, I found her sitting at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at a box of old family photos. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Do you think," she whispered, "that I failed him?" "Failed who?" I asked softly. "Your father." Her voice cracked. "He trusted me to keep this family together, and now look at us." I pulled up a chair and took her hand. "Mom," I said, "Dad didn't ask you to keep the house. He didn't ask you to play peacekeeper. He asked you to raise us with love. And you did." Tears filled her eyes. "But Ethan made his choices," I said gently. "And they weren't your fault." She nodded, but it did little to ease her heart. Weeks passed. We settled into new routines. I picked up extra shifts at work to cover bills. Mom started volunteering at the local senior center, trying to distract herself. Life didn't get easier, but it kept moving. Every so often, I'd drive past the old house. And every time, it felt like a stab in the chest. After the eviction, Ethan had remodeled the outside, new paint, new shutters, a brand new truck in the driveway. It didn't look like my childhood home anymore. It looked like he was trying to erase every trace of us. But all the money in the world couldn't change what was happening inside. Because while Mom and I struggled, Ethan's new life of success was beginning to crack. At first, it was little things. A neighbor mentioned he'd been yelling on the phone outside late at night. Another said they'd seen people banging on his door. A friend from town mentioned Ethan had started missing payments on something, though no one knew what. And then came the whispers about the contractor. The man Ethan had hired to renovate the house. The man Ethan hadn't paid. Rumors spread that the contractor had filed a lawsuit. That Ethan was drowning in debt. That his new life was built on credit cards and borrowed time. I didn't want to believe it. Even after everything he'd done. I didn't want my brother to suffer. But life doesn't care what you want. Life gives you what you earn. And Ethan was about to earn more than he bargained for. Because the day Mom had been dreading, the day she secretly hoped would never come, arrived in the form of a short voicemail. A voicemail from a number I recognized instantly. Ethan. His voice was trembling. His words rushed, panicked, choked. Adam. I need to talk to you. Please. I messed up. I need help. I stared at the phone for a long time after the message ended. Mom watched me from across the room, her face pale. What is it? She asked quietly. I played the voicemail. When it finished, Mom's hand shot to her chest. Oh God, she whispered. He sounds terrified. He does, I admitted. Are you going to call him back? She asked. I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Part of me wanted to hang up and forget I ever heard his voice again. But another part of me, the part Dad raised, knew better. Blood is complicated. Family is complicated. And no matter how broken a sibling bond is, some ties never fully disappear. I didn't call him back that night. But life didn't wait for my decision. The next morning, someone else called. Not Ethan. A deputy. My blood ran cold as he said the words. Sir, are you the relative of Ethan Carter? Yes, I managed. I'm his brother. There's been an incident, he said. My heart plummeted. What happened? I whispered. You may want to come down to the county office. Your brother is in custody. Custody. Not injured. Not hospitalized. Custody. Mom dropped her teacup. It shattered across the kitchen tile. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, not my baby. But this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Of Ethan's downfall. Of his regret. And of the truth that would finally rip through the lies he'd built his entire world on. The day had come when he would need the brother he betrayed. And he had no idea. Just how much he was about to lose. The county office was a gray concrete building that always smelled like stale coffee and old carpet. I had been there once to pay a parking ticket. Never in my life had I imagined walking in to deal with anything involving Ethan. But there I was, sitting beside Mom in a plastic chair, waiting for someone to call our name. She looked fragile, her hands trembling in her lap. Her eyes red and swollen. Her breath shaky. I kept my hand on her shoulder to steady her. She had aged 10 years overnight. A deputy finally approached us. You're here for Ethan Carter? Yes, I said, standing. He nodded and led us down a hallway lined with closed office doors. Every step felt like walking deeper into a nightmare I didn't want to enter. We were shown into a small room with a metal table. A few minutes later, a different officer entered, one with tired eyes and a notepad. Your brother was arrested last night, he said bluntly. Mom gasped. For what? I asked. The officer exhaled through his nose. Multiple charges. Fraud. Contract violations. Debt evasion. And, there's also a pending investigation regarding forged documents. Forged documents. The words hit me like a punch to the throat. Mom grabbed my arm as if she were about to collapse. But, that can't be right, she whispered. The officer looked at us carefully. We can't discuss the details until after a formal statement. But your brother asked for you. Us? I said. Both of you. Mom started to cry softly. The officer opened the door and nodded. He's in the next room. I helped Mom stand. Her legs were weak. My heart was pounding. We walked into a small visitation room. Ethan sat at the table. Handcuffs on. Eyes dark and swollen. Hair disheveled. Clothes wrinkled and dirty. He looked nothing like the confident man who had evicted us. He looked broken. Mom walked to him instantly, hands covering her mouth. "Oh, Ethan, my baby," she whispered. Ethan's face crumbled. "Mom," he choked out, tears filling his eyes. "I'm so sorry." She pulled him into her arms as best she could with the cuffs on. I stood still. Arms crossed. Heart heavy. He eventually looked up at me. And the moment our eyes met, I saw something I had never seen in him before. Raw fear. "Adam," he whispered. "I need you." I didn't move. Didn't speak. I waited. He swallowed hard. "They're saying I faked Dad's will," he said. "But I didn't. I swear I didn't." "Then why did it go to court?" I asked quietly. "Why did you fight us?" He wiped his face with the back of his cuffed hands. "Because I was desperate." "Desperate for what?" I demanded. He hesitated. Then the truth spilled out. I was in debt. Deep debt. A contractor threatened to sue me. My business was failing. I thought, if I could get Dad's house, I could sell it. Or use it for collateral. I didn't mean. He broke down into sobs. "I didn't mean to hurt you. Or Mom. I was scared." Mom cried with him, stroking his hair. But I felt numb. "So," I said slowly, "you didn't find a new will from Dad?" He shook his head violently. "No. I made it up. I thought the judge would never believe it. But then the handwriting thing came back inconclusive and everything spiraled." I clenched my fists. "So you lied," I said. "You stole our house. You evicted Mom. You took everything. For money?" He nodded, sobbing harder. "I ruined my life," he said. "And I ruined yours." Mom looked at me through tears. "Adam," she whispered, "please, help him. He's still your brother." Brother. The word felt foreign. But as I looked at Ethan, shaking, crying, terrified, I didn't see the manipulator who stole our home. I saw the scared boy who used to follow me around the backyard. The kid who cried when he broke Dad's fishing rod. The teenager who punched a bully for mocking me. He wasn't evil. He was flawed. Weak. Lost. And yes, he had hurt us. But in that moment, I realized something important. Holding on to anger was only hurting me. Letting go was the only way forward. I took a deep breath. "Ethan," I said quietly, "I'm not promising anything. But I'm here." He broke down again. "Thank you," he whispered. "God, Adam. I'm so sorry." Mom held both of our hands across the table. Tears streamed down all our faces. It didn't fix anything. But it was the first step. The step that would eventually lead to the moment Ethan would finally confront the truth. The moment he would fully, painfully, deeply regret everything he had done. A moment that was still coming. And when it came, nothing would ever be the same. It took months for the legal process to unfold. Months of hearings. Months of paperwork. Months of painful conversations. Ethan was released on probation while the investigation continued, but he wasn't free. Not financially. Not emotionally. Not morally. He was stuck in a small apartment the court approved. He had no car. No job. No friends. And, for the first time in his life, no confidence. Mom and I visited him regularly. Not because he deserved it, but because abandoning him would make us no better than he had been. Some nights, Mom cried on the way home. Other nights she smiled softly, saying, "I saw a little bit of your brother today. The boy he used to be." I wasn't as quick to forgive. Seeing Ethan broke something in me every time. Not anger. Not hatred. Sadness. Seeing someone who once stood tall now barely able to stand at all. It's heartbreaking in a way that's hard to explain. But the most important day came 6 months after his arrest. The day a new piece of evidence surfaced. One that would change everything. A letter. A letter from Dad. Found in an old file cabinet in the county archives during a digitization project. A letter addressed to both of us. To my sons, Adam and Ethan. It was dated 2 months before Dad died. Mom called me the moment she heard. "Adam," she said breathlessly, "the attorney wants us there immediately." We drove to the office together, hands trembling, hearts pounding. When we arrived, Ethan was already there, sitting small, quiet, terrified. The attorney placed the letter on the table. "This was written by your father himself," he said. Verified handwriting. Witnessed by a clerk who notarized it at the time. Ethan looked like he might throw up. The attorney opened the letter and began reading aloud. And with every word, the room seemed to shrink around us. "My dear sons. If you are reading this, it means I didn't get the chance to give these words to you myself. I want you both to share the house. Not for the money. Not for the land. But because this home is where our family began, and I want it to remain something you both take care of together. Ethan, I know you've struggled with responsibility, and I hope this home will remind you of your roots. Adam, I know you've always carried more than your share, and I hope this home will remind you to let others try. This house is not an inheritance. It is a bond. A place for the two of you to remain brothers. Please, take care of each other. That is all I ask. Dad." When the attorney finished, the room fell silent. Mom covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I felt a tightness in my chest, one that made breathing difficult. And Ethan. Ethan broke. He sobbed in a way I hadn't heard since we were kids. Big, heavy, body-shaking cries. "I ruined everything," he choked out. "He wanted us to take care of each other, and I destroyed us instead." He dropped his face into his hands. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." And for the first time, his tears weren't manipulative. Or self-pitying. Or dramatic. They were real. They were the tears of someone who finally understood the weight of what he had done. The attorney cleared his throat. "With this letter," he said gently, "the case is being re-evaluated. The charges related to forged documents will likely be dismissed. But the fraud and financial crimes, those remain." Ethan nodded weakly. "I know," he whispered. "I'll take whatever punishment they give me." For the first time, he wasn't fighting anymore. He wasn't blaming anyone. He wasn't pretending. He was accepting. And that acceptance changed everything. Ethan's sentencing came 2 months later. Mom and I sat in the courtroom, front row, holding hands tightly. Ethan walked in wearing a simple shirt and slacks. No handcuffs. He had been cooperative and compliant throughout the process. His head was lowered. His posture small. His face pale. When the judge entered, the room fell silent. The charges were read. Debt non-payment. Contract fraud. Misuse of property. The forged will charges had indeed been dropped. The judge took a long pause before speaking. "Mr. Carter," he said sternly, "you allowed desperation to lead you into dishonesty. But you have shown remorse. You have cooperated fully. And you have attempted to make amends." Mom squeezed my hand harder. "Therefore," the judge continued, "your sentence will be reduced to 2 years of community service, mandatory financial counseling, repayment of your outstanding debts, and continued supervised probation. Not jail. Not prison. A chance." Ethan looked stunned, tears filling his eyes. When the judge dismissed the case, Ethan turned toward us. He walked slowly, hesitantly, as if unsure whether he had the right to be near us. Mom hugged him first. A long, trembling, forgiving hug. He cried into her shoulder. When he turned to me, he didn't reach for a hug. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just said, "Adam, I will spend the rest of my life trying to fix what I broke." I nodded. Not because I forgave him completely, but because I knew he meant it. We walked out of the courthouse together, Mom between us, holding onto each of our arms. For the first time in over a year. It felt like we were a family again. A broken family, yes. But a family rebuilding. The next year was quiet. Slow. Healing. Ethan worked long hours doing community cleanup, clearing parks, repainting buildings, hauling trash out of ravines. Mom visited him every Thursday with a packed lunch. Sometimes I went too. Not always. Forgiveness isn't a switch you flip. It's a muscle you slowly rebuild. Ethan started going to therapy. He got a part-time job working for a small landscaping company. He sold his fancy clothes. He learned how to budget. And little by little, he became someone I recognized again. One evening, nearly a year after the sentencing, Ethan came to my apartment for dinner. He looked healthier. Calmer. More grounded. After we ate, he asked if we could talk privately. "Sure," I said, unsure what to expect. He took a deep breath. "I want you to have the house," he said softly. I froze. "What?" He nodded. "I talked to an attorney. The court wants it sold to help settle my debts, but I can transfer my rights to you before the sale." I stared at him. "I don't want the house, Ethan. Not like this." "I know," he said. "But I need to give it to you. I need to know I did one thing right." He swallowed. "I took everything from you. And from Mom. And from Dad's memory. I can't undo that. But I can make sure you're not left with nothing." My throat tightened. "Ethan," I said gently, "Dad didn't want that house to divide us. He wanted it to bring us together." He looked down. "I know. And I failed." "No," I said, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You made mistakes. Big ones. But you're trying. And that matters." He looked up, eyes glistening. "Do you forgive me?" I took a long breath. Forgiveness is heavy. But so is carrying resentment. "Ethan," I said quietly, "I'm not all the way there yet. But I'm closer than I was." He nodded slowly. "That's fair," he whispered. We sat in silence for a long time. Not awkward silence. Healing silence. Then Ethan said something I will never forget. "I thought money would make me strong. But losing everything, that's what finally made me grow." And in that moment, I realized something. Sometimes regret isn't punishment. Sometimes regret is the beginning of change. To this day, the house is gone. It had to be sold to settle Ethan's debts. But losing it no longer hurts the way it used to. Because now I know the truth. A house doesn't make a family. A will doesn't make a family. Even blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Forgiveness does. Choosing each other does. Ethan and I still carry scars. So does Mom. But we're rebuilding. Slowly. Lovingly. Honestly. And Ethan? He regrets everything he did. Not because he lost money. Not because he faced punishment. Not because life hit him hard. He regrets it because he realized, too late, that he hurt the people who loved him most. But he's trying. Every day. And sometimes, that's enough. If you're listening to this, take this with you. Family isn't perfect. People make mistakes, big ones. People get lost. People fall apart. But regret can be the doorway to redemption. And forgiveness, when you're ready, can be the path to peace. Thank you for listening to my story. If you made it this far, comment. Family is more than blood. And remember, love the people who matter. Forgive what you can. Heal what you must. And never let greed destroy what love built. This was my story. And I hope it helps someone out there write a better one.